People say that 21 days of naked and afraid just isn't enough. This time, the production team has brought back contestants who previously completed the challenge to a tropical wilderness for a 40-day trial. The environment here is like being in an oven every day. 12 contestants will be divided into 4 groups of 3, each starting from different locations. They will encounter various dangers along the way and must remain vigilant at all times, or they might not even realize what bit them. The extraction point has been extended to 40 miles, making the survival challenge more dangerous than previous seasons. In the wilds of Colombia, swarms of annoying mosquitoes are everywhere, and even with repellent, they are relentless. Under the dual torment of extreme heat and humidity, even the strongest bodies are tested. Don't forget, it's also the rainy season, making it even harder to start a fire to maintain body temperature. The individual strengths of the contestants are very high this season, but teamwork is valued even more. It remains to be seen whether this will lead to strong alliances or frequent conflicts. The production team has dropped them into central Colombia, and everyone is very excited about the prospect of staying for 40 days and reaching the extraction point. Teamwork is especially important. This challenge isn't just about enduring hunger. Teams like Andrew, Cole, and Kayla are seasoned in wilderness survival. Their biggest concern is the local mosquitoes, and the production team has not provided any repellent. Andrew has faced various difficulties in past challenges, not only the hardships of survival, but also managing conflicts among teammates. His last challenge brought significant personal growth, and as long as everyone works together, 40 days should not be too difficult. They are very confident they can complete the challenge. Next door, the team of Adam, Heather, and Sam seems much more tense. They feel the area is fraught with dangers and accidents could happen at any time. Despite Heather having completed 2 21-day challenges, she finds this one to be tougher than ever and hopes her teammates can withstand the pressure to complete the 40 days. Tara, Lindsay, and Nathan's team have also started making their way to their destination. Their greatest fear is the snakes hidden in the grass, as there are many venomous ones here. A single bite could mean an emergency evacuation. Tara hates the local insects, constantly bothered by their buzzing, and finds it hard to keep them away with just a fire. She recalls a past challenge where her partner had to be evacuated due to illness, leaving her to finish alone. This time, she's eager to complete the challenge with her teammates and avoid going solo again. The final group includes Chris, Mallory, and Shell, who were quickly schooled by the local branches upon entering the area. The environment is even harsher than they anticipated. Chris is very confident in his abilities, having previously faced off against a cobra. For him, this challenge seems straightforward. As usual, the contestants must strip down to nothing. Each contestant is allowed to choose 2 pieces of equipment before arriving, with a knife being essential for wilderness survival. The second item is up to personal preference, but so far, nothing too unusual has been chosen. Only items that are practical for survival. Based on the map's directions, we need to head to the extraction point, about 40 miles away. This distance is far greater than in previous challenges, so they must plan their time and energy wisely. The route choice, from the prairie into the jungle, is crucial as it directly affects the completion of the challenge. Adam, who once walked 21 miles over 21 days in his first challenge, was exhausted beyond measure afterward, spending days in bed to recover. This challenge, being several times harder, requires quick decisions on the next path to take. Each contestant has their own ideas, whether to cover more ground early on or to push harder later, all requiring ample food and water. They aim to stick close to water sources for fishing and potentially hunting crocodiles. After brief discussions, each team has confirmed their routes. Adam, Heather, and Sam have opted to head towards the river, a journey of at least 9 miles that could exhaust them right from the start. Traveling under high temperatures is tougher than expected, and soon signs of dehydration appear among the trio, forcing them to prioritize finding water. However, to cover the 40 miles, they need to advance while their energy lasts, ensuring they reach the extraction point on time despite the challenges. Unsure of how long they've been walking, they feel extremely fatigued. Adam boasts extensive survival experience, even having faced a swarm of bees unflinchingly during honey gathering. So his main concern now is whether his teammates can cope. Sam notices a decrease in sweating, a serious sign of dehydration preventing normal body cooling. Walking barefoot, he fears the heat could severely harm them if they don't find water soon. Despite being on higher ground, no water sources are in sight, increasing his frustration. Tara, Lindsay, and Nathan plan to venture deeper into the jungle where water and food are more plentiful, but are concerned about snake bites. They prefer to move slowly to avoid sudden encounters with dangerous creatures, more fearful of dehydration from the heat than the snakes themselves. Nathan feels like he's reenacting primitive firemaking. Despite his experience, he's not sure he can last till the end, but hopes to showcase his strength and contribute to the team. They're already breathless, less than 5 miles in, struggling to imagine how they'll complete the remaining distance. Dehydration is becoming a critical issue, and they urgently need to find a water source. With hills to cross and forests to traverse, maintaining a steady pace is essential to endure until they reach a water source. Andrew, Cole, and Kyela decided to head to a jungle 6 kilometers away. Cole wasn't worried about encountering snakes. Instead, he saw them as a valuable food resource. If not for the need to keep moving, he would have liked to stop and hunt. Having once survived alone in the mountains for 30 days relying on hunting, Cole was confident in his ability to secure meat with a bow and arrow. This time, he even wanted to try hunting crocodiles. However, their immediate priority was to find a water source. Upon entering the jungle, they discovered a small pond, not only perfect for replenishing water, but also potentially for catching fish. Ideally, they hoped to find a pond with crocodiles. They also planned to clear the surroundings and build a temporary shelter. Unfortunately, Andrew screamed from dehydration and leg cramps as soon as he entered the jungle, signaling that they might face more physical issues later on. Meanwhile, Adam's group had only covered about 5 miles, still some distance from their goal. Suddenly, they found a small stream. Considering that continuing to the big river might physically overwhelm them, Adam decided to stop and make a fire to boil water and rest. More worried about dehydration than hunger, after a brief discussion, the team decided to rest there, prioritizing making a fire and boiling water. The high humidity made starting a fire exceptionally difficult, exhausting Adam, and making him doubt his ability to continue under the dual threats of heat stroke and dehydration. Despite the time and energy it took to make a fire, he eventually managed to light it, improving his mood. Now they could boil and drink the water. Chris's group aimed for a swamp 10 miles away and had already walked 6 miles, maintaining a good spirit. Although Mallory had strategy disagreements with his teammates in the previous challenge, leading to arguments, but she still actively participated in all tasks. Whether it was collecting firewood or fishing, she gave it her all. This time, she hoped her teammates would support each other more and also listen more to her suggestions. They covered the most distance that day. Despite sore legs and bodies covered in mosquito bites, finding a water source kept them going. The area was rich in resources, home to various fish and eels, including the precious caiman. A small caiman alone could feed 3 people for several days. They were eager to explore the swamp further. Tara's group hadn't found water yet. Their skin had turned red as if they were partially cooked. Fortunately, there was a jungle ahead where they could find some relief from the heat. However, the area was plagued with mosquitoes, and within a short time, they felt as if their backsides were almost bitten through. However, Lindsay enjoys these high-difficulty challenges and is very confident in her outdoor survival skills. In the last challenge, she caught many fish. The jungle floor is covered with leafcutter ants, and a single bite can cause bleeding, making wounds prone to infection. Improper treatment could lead to more than just amputation. Despite their caution, it's hard to cope with the overwhelming ants, and they must endure the pain and keep moving. Chris's group found that the jungle was even hotter than outside, and more worryingly, they discovered cheetah tracks nearby, unsure if their weapons were sufficient to ward off these predators. Fortunately, they found a nearby water source to boil water for drinking. They planned to find a shaded area to build a shelter, although it's quite laborious to clear. Cole's group just found a suitable campsite that required minimal preparation. Their immediate task is to quickly start a fire and boil water. Each team member took on specific roles, striving to gather kindling and water sources. As long as they can successfully start a fire and boil the water, they would consider it a major accomplishment for the day. Kayla felt more exhausted by this challenge than any before, even though it was only the first day, feeling very tired and hungry. Sunset came faster than expected, and they needed to hurry to finish all preparations. Meanwhile, Tara's group had not yet found a suitable location for their shelter. The water was murky and potentially dangerous. The bubbles on the water surface made them hesitant to proceed, preferring to stop and check rather than risk crossing. They chose a flat area as their campsite and decided to spend the night there after a brief discussion. Due to the lack of dry materials nearby, they focused all their energy on making a fire. Maintaining the fire required constant blowing and fuel addition, and the flames could go out at any moment. They had to act quickly. After drinking water, Adam felt rejuvenated, finally overcoming dehydration. They hurried to build a shelter, and Sam's collaboration with his previous partner allowed them to overcome many difficulties, raising his expectations for the team's performance. However, their main problem was the overwhelming ants, with Adam's legs covered in ant bites. To establish the shelter, Chris and his team invested a lot of time and energy. They discovered that the local termites could be used as a natural insect repellent by crushing them and applying them to the skin, which worked surprisingly well. Additionally, to solve their food problem, they tried making small fish ponds. Chris had already completed the shelter frame, and next, they only needed to cover it with palm leaves. The only downside is that such shelters are not rainproof, and they could only hope it wouldn't rain on the first day. Tara's team is waiting for the water to boil for drinking. Lindsay suggests building a shelter nearby and stresses the need for a roof to shield from the rain. After a brief discussion, the team quickly springs into action. Currently, the team is cooperating smoothly, with no disputes over minor issues, and everyone is confident about completing the challenge. In contrast, the situation for Cole's team is less optimistic. Their shelter is not only poorly equipped to prevent rain, but also fails to block the wind at night. With time pressing and limited materials, they can only make do for the night. Andrew feels anxious about potential problems that could arise after dark. Despite being exhausted, Tara's team performed excellently on the first day, successfully securing a water source and fire and building a shelter. Meanwhile, Chris's team heard crocodile noises at night and discovered cheetah tracks nearby, spending the night worried about safety. Unfortunately for Adam's team, not only did they hear the cheetahs, but they also felt the predators lurking nearby. To drive the cheetahs away, they had to continually make noise. Adam kept a vigilant watch until he was sure the cheetahs had left. The environment here is more hostile than expected, and a sudden downpour at midnight made things worse. Although Lindsay's team had a shelter with a roof, they still needed to be careful to maintain the fire. Covered in bite marks, it was nearly impossible to sleep peacefully in such conditions. The heavy rain greatly affected their mood. If it continued all night, Cole's shelter likely wouldn't hold up. As the rain intensified, Adam's team hurriedly fortified their shelter. The contestants hadn't anticipated the rainy season arriving so swiftly and barely made it through to the second day. Cole's shelter suffered severe damage, but fortunately, the fire had not yet gone out. Making fire was extremely difficult, and if the next few days continued like this, it would be hard for them to endure. Today, they must strengthen the shelter's structure and waterproof it. After a quick discussion, they began working. Cole, having experienced several sleepless nights, was significantly affected and did not want others to endure the same ordeal. Adam's team found many cheetah tracks nearby. The area was too dangerous with constant threats of attacks. Everyone was in poor spirits. They still needed to finish the shelter, and Adam did not want to spend all night repairing it. He had no plans to make it perfect. As long as it could block the rain, that would be sufficient. They aimed to conserve as much energy as possible with more tasks ahead. Heather wanted to go fishing, but even without finding any bait, she was undeterred. She carved some marks on a stick, planted it in the ground, and gently touched it to attract insects. Soon, she had successfully made bait and was ready to fish, although she was unsure how many fish she would catch. Meanwhile, Chris's team had an uncomfortable night. Today, they needed to rebuild a better shelter to avoid another leaky roof. They planned to create a larger space, which meant they needed more palm leaves and would expend a great deal of energy. With crocodiles in the water, they hoped to catch some for food. They had to be extremely cautious while gathering materials to avoid agitating the nearby wasps, as getting stung was very painful. The area where Tara's team was located was swarmed with mosquitoes, and the constant buzzing was unbearable. The most troubling issue was the lack of sunlight, which made the environment exceptionally damp and cold. To improve living conditions, the team added a new frame to the existing shelter, providing more space and better conditions for keeping a fire going. After a busy period, the shelter was finally built, but it was still uncertain if it would leak. Lindsay was quite satisfied, however. Tara felt uncomfortable due to the excessive dampness, requiring constant rehydration. To maintain a continuous fire, they needed to find drier fuel and dry it out. In an accident, Lindsay was bitten by leaf-cutting ants, fortunately avoiding more dangerous snakes. Cole's team was also busy collecting materials to reinforce their shelter. Available materials were not abundant, and some had been nibbled on. They spent a lot of time and energy fixing the shelter. Now, lying in the shelter felt relatively comfortable. At least they didn't have to worry about rain at night. Meanwhile, Heather was busy fishing. There were plenty of small fish in the water, and she quickly pulled them up whenever she felt a bite. Adam and Sam were very pleased, even though the fish were small and only provided a bite each. However, they believed they could catch more food in the future. As night fell, Cole felt ants everywhere and couldn't sleep well. He felt he would go insane if this continued. What was worse, the roof was damaged by the leaf-cutting ants. If it rained, they would be in trouble. Barely making it to dawn, Cole felt targeted by the leaf-cutting ants, which had damaged most of the leaves overnight. Staying here any longer would yield no good results. They had to rebuild the shelter. For now, they could only try using fire to drive the ants away, hoping the leaf-cutting ants would also stay away from the shelter. Mallory has been almost completely unrested for 3 days, shivering with cold. To improve this situation, Chris plans to build a wall to reflect heat, hoping to make sleeping at night more comfortable. He intends to erect some posts and fill them with palm leaves to retain more heat inside the shelter. Lindsay is fairly satisfied with her current life, at least not worrying about shelter and fire starting issues. The key is whether they can catch fish to eat. The fish here are more aggressive than expected, capable of breaking the fishing line within minutes. Nonetheless, she remains confident as she just caught a fish. Nathan demonstrated how to quickly process a fish by using his teeth to bite off the back of its head and break its spine. A simple and brutal method, though tough on the mouth. Cole is preparing to make an elevated bed and plans to pile grass on it to prevent ants from climbing up. Everyone endures discomfort while gathering materials, and lack of sufficient sleep leads to mistakes. For instance, Andrew accidentally chopped his finger while working, a severe injury that simple bandaging could not address, and prone to infection in the wild. Although doctors recommended he go to the hospital, Andrew wanted to persist, not wanting to quit the challenge just yet. This was a huge blow to the team, having work efficiency. Heather collected bait again, ready to go fishing. Adam, carrying fish hooks, entered the water and discovered a small waterfall ahead, thinking there would be more fish there. Although the fish were small, their numbers were significant. After a busy period, there was a pile of grilled fish available in the shelter. However, these were not enough to fill their stomachs, and they still needed to devise a way to catch a crocodile. Cole tried to rest on the bed, which would be more comfortable without mosquito interference. Now, the issue was whether they could catch enough fish. Due to the injury, Andrew had to stay in the shelter. Along the way, Cole also caught some grasshoppers as bait. He actually preferred using a bow and arrow for hunting. Now, Andrew could only do some light activities, worried he might not be able to persist with the challenge. Lindsay believed that as long as they had fish to eat every day, they were very likely to complete the challenge. Just as she finished speaking, Tara accidentally injured her hand. This again proved the dangers of lack of sufficient sleep, and they immediately called a doctor to treat the wound. Fortunately, the wound was not deep, but it still needed stitches to prevent infection, and the pain without anesthesia was imaginable. The upcoming challenges would be even tougher, and it was uncertain if Tara could continue. Cole and Kyla were busy fishing. Despite the abundance of fish in the water, they couldn't catch any. Cole, frustrated, picked up a bow and arrow to try fishing. But this proved even harder than using a fishing rod. His repeated attempts not only failed, but also scared away the fish near Kyla. Chris's reflective wall proved effective. It was indeed warmer inside. Now the problem was how to obtain food. Unexpectedly, mosquitoes became more numerous, and the fire was ineffective against them. The buzzing could even be felt through the screen. They were covered in bites, and Cole's situation was particularly bad. Ants continually appeared in the shelter at night, seemingly ready to carry everything away, making it impossible to sleep. They wished they could just burn all the ants. They struggled until dawn on the fourth day, with not a single intact leaf left on the roof. They could not think of an effective solution to the problem, either waking up from insect bites or being bitten along the way. Despite Tara's painful injury, she still wanted to contribute to the team. Lindsay fully understood Tara's feelings, but still suggested she rest. To ensure a clean water source, Nathan decided to build a filtration well system. The soil could effectively filter out most impurities, and as long as the well was properly maintained, they would have a stable source of drinking water. Nathan thought the well was deep enough and the water tasted fine, though they would have to see if it caused any stomach issues tomorrow. Andrew just wanted to gather some firewood, but his wound reopened. The pain was unbearable, with blood already seeping out. He felt like he was dragging the team down. The doctor also advised him to go back, as there was a risk of infection. The pain during wound cleaning made him question life, and Andrew no longer wanted to stay. He just wanted to go home and treat his wound. It was regrettable that he had to leave the challenge after just 4 days. Kyla was still immersed in the sadness of her teammates' departure, and Cole didn't know how to comfort her, only picking up a bow and arrow to try hunting. He attempted to aim at fish in the water, but the results were poor, even breaking the fishing line, and he caught nothing. As his mood worsened, Cole felt he could not complete the challenge and regretfully decided to quit. Within 1 day, Kyla lost 2 companions, felt extremely upset, and didn't know how long she could hold on. By the 4th day, Kyla's teammates had all dropped out, leaving her to face the difficulties alone. Just gathering firewood and struggling to make fire to boil water had exhausted her. The worst was when it rained. The shelter leaked everywhere. Without a solution, she could only clutch herself close to the fire for warmth, hoping to hold on until she could reunite with the other contestants. Meanwhile, Mallory felt terribly the night before, with everyone huddled close to the fire to stay warm. Facing unknown challenges, there were still 31 miles to the evacuation point. Despite previous extreme challenges, the environment here was even harsher. They urgently needed food to replenish their energy and find ways to repel mosquitoes. Lack of adequate sleep would eventually take its toll. Ticks had even burrowed into Chris's leg, and every small wound could get infected. Shell had to burn off the bugs for him. Though Chris was drained, he still had to endure the discomfort and keep moving. The neighboring group was busy working. Although physically tired, their spirits seemed good. With 34 miles to the evacuation point, and relying on the food they had gathered, they could still walk and laugh. But to feed 3 people, small fish were no longer enough. They had to try hunting crocodiles to get enough energy to continue hiking. Adam was already preparing a spear, eager to try crocodile meat. With the team's morale high, they decided to continue expanding their survival advantage in the wild. Sam was not content to passively wait for food. He took the initiative to explore the unknown environment to secure more food sources. Their momentum seemed set on hunting a crocodile. Unfortunately, They hadn't found a water source along the way, and with the sun setting, they had to quicken their pace. They planned to head to the swamp and build a makeshift shelter there for the night. This group had strong hunting capabilities, but was just unlucky in finding suitable prey. Walking barefoot through the bushes easily led to injuries. Sam, leading the way, endured great hardship. Suddenly, a scream. Poor Sam was stung by wasps. Despite the pain, he quickly evacuated, even wishing he could burn down the area. Fortunately, with him leading, the other two avoided harm. If there were a next time, he would never want to lead again. Kaila went out alone to search for food, now using small bugs as bait, hoping to catch big fish. Fishing was harder than she imagined. She had cast all her baited lines into the water, hoping for a catch by tomorrow. Adam's team began stealthily searching for food, primarily aiming to catch crocodiles. The major concern under the high temperatures was dehydration, and Adam was determined not to face that ordeal again. Fortunately, there was a shaded area ahead where they could take a brief rest and check for any water sources. After some time, they finally found river water. The resources here seemed more abundant, and their primary task now was to make fire for boiling water. While Adam was busy with the fire, Heather decided to go fishing, while Sam wanted to hydrate before doing anything else. Although Heather was also tired, she refused to just sit and wait, leading to a dispute between the two. Eventually, Heather went fishing alone, leaving Sam feeling helpless, only hoping that she wouldn't faint from dehydration. Heather confidently stated that she knew how to survive in the wild and was aware of her body's limits. She joined the challenge to test herself and wouldn't just sit idly by. Tara's team had not found food for a long time, and Lindsay was now very anxious. The injured Tara had become weaker, making it harder to contribute to the team. Without replenishment of food, they might be forced to withdraw by a doctor. When they suddenly saw a large fish in the water, Nathan immediately went to fetch the fishing net to try and catch it, while Lindsay and Tara waded into the water to drive the fish towards the net. Although the plan sounded good, stirring up the water made it impossible for Nathan to see clearly, and he couldn't even spot the fish. Nonetheless, he resolutely cast the net and fortunately caught some small fish, but no big ones. Tara and Lindsay kept urging Nathan to hurry, but he didn't want to waste more time and silently moved on with the fishing line to another spot. This left them puzzled, not understanding what they had done wrong. The team atmosphere significantly worsened, and Tara, not daring to speak much, just silently watched Nathan fish, feeling increasingly despondent. Despite Nathan still being there, it felt as if the team had already lost a member. Kaila eyed the monkeys in the trees, her mouth watering with desire. Although the production team advised against eating these animals, she thought that if given the chance, tasting the meat wouldn't be so bad. However, her more pressing task was to improve their shelter. Recently, leafcutter ants had been causing her endless trouble, and with the rainy season approaching, their rudimentary shelter could not withstand the rain. She needed to build a more waterproof shelter. Most of the bark around her had rotted, and the resources were extremely limited. She had to spend a lot of time and effort selecting bark, while also being cautious of scorpions and spiders that might be hiding within it. Kayla felt overwhelmed facing these difficulties alone. A bite from these dangerous creatures could mean an emergency evacuation by the crew. She took the bark to the water to wash it, removing the insects inside, which could also attract fish, killing 2 birds with 1 stone. She hoped the leafcutter ants would not take interest in the bark this time. She longed for the shelter to be completed quickly, so she could have a stable night's sleep. However, as her strength dwindled, without a replenishment of food, she might also have to quit the challenge and go home to rest. Kaila endured the discomfort, transporting bark back and forth. She worried that a few more trips like this might truly exhaust her. Chris was busy gathering firewood. He didn't want to have to restart the fire once it went out, so he decided to build a sawhorse to improve efficiency. Although life was generally good, the lack of food affected everyone's morale. When he found a plump grasshopper, he knew it would be the perfect bait. Mallory had been looking for good bait, and with this grasshopper, they felt confident about fishing. The fish in the lake were plentiful, and Mallory tried to move to deeper waters. Despite the tempting grasshopper, no fish took the bait, which gradually frustrated her. Meanwhile, Sam was busy drying materials for starting a fire, while Adam and Heather tried their luck at fishing. Unexpectedly, Adam spotted a crocodile in the water, which thrilled Heather. Catching it would mean they wouldn't have to worry about food for several days. Adam crafted a lasso and cautiously approached the crocodile. When he was just a few meters away, he quickly threw it around the crocodile. The crocodile struggled wildly, splashing water everywhere. Adam used his body weight to control the crocodile while Heather rushed to help. Although their stance looked awkward, they successfully captured the crocodile. Adam was ecstatic. The crocodile was massive, its tail alone enough to feed the three of them for a whole day. Chris, desperately hungry, hoped to encounter a crocodile or snake. As the weather grew hotter, he felt increasingly overwhelmed by the heat and humidity, which made him dizzy after walking only a short distance. Unexpectedly, his toe was pricked by a thorn, causing him pain that made it difficult to walk, forcing him to return to the shelter for treatment. At this point, the team had to rely on Mallory for fishing. Although fish swam nearby, none took the bait. After several attempts, Mallory finally caught a small fish. She used the fish's innards as bait and tried again. This bait proved more effective, and soon she caught several more fish. After a busy session, they had 6 fish, enough to roast and eat. Chris and Shell, seeing that there was meat to eat, were overjoyed. They placed the fish directly on the fire to cook, savoring the delicious taste. Even the bones were crunchy. Satisfied and full, they finally felt some comfort in their stomachs. Because Nathan was acting alone, the team atmosphere suddenly turned awkward. He did not interact with others, merely working in silence. Tara was worried about Nathan's mental state, as this challenge required teamwork to complete. She tried to communicate with Nathan, but he ignored her, making Tara very angry and even considering changing teammates to continue the challenge. However, realizing that her own injury also limited her ability to help, her mood grew heavier. In fact, Nathan simply preferred not to talk while busy. After Tara and Lindsay approached him with their concerns, he expressed a willingness to change his behavior and integrate better into the team. He acknowledged that his behavior needed improvement, but it would take some time, and he hoped his teammates could understand. Due to a cognitive disorder, Nathan became even more reticent in crowded situations. After some communication, the team's relationship eased. Tara finally understood Nathan's behavior and tried to make him feel comfortable in the team. Nathan felt this was beneficial, as it allowed him to focus more on the tasks. Despite being physically tired, he was still able to persevere. Although this was suitable for wilderness survival, it did pose some difficulties in team collaboration. Lindsay felt that Nathan was very strong and that more communication would definitely solve the problem. Sam was busy carrying the crocodile back to camp, and they all felt they were close to suffering heat stroke. The fire at the shelter was not yet ready, and the pot was low on water. At that moment, the crocodile seemed like a burden. Nevertheless, the crocodile's meat was necessary, and they had to endure the discomfort and carry it back. The 3 of them took turns carrying the crocodile, which still put a significant strain on their bodies. Sam was exhausted to the extreme, his vision blurring. They needed to find water quickly to cool down and prevent Sam from getting heat stroke. Sam did not want to waste time caring for himself. The shelter was close, and he gritted his teeth and continued forward. Upon returning to camp, they immediately started a fire to boil water. Handling the crocodile was left to Adam, and Sam could finally rest a bit. For the next few days, they could look forward to enjoying the crocodile meat, which excited them greatly. Kayla was busy improving the shelter. The palm leaves were no longer usable, so she had to use dry grass instead. She was exhausted after completing only a small part and realized she could not finish today. Thinking about another sleepless night, her spirits sank even lower. If she had help from her teammates, she would not be so tired. Meanwhile, Adam was cleaning the crocodile meat, planning to use the unused parts as bait. The tail of the crocodile was the most delicious part, and the meat quality was surprisingly good. indicating its frequent activity. If it weren't for the fear of stomach issues from eating it raw, Adam would have liked to try it uncooked. Cooking this meat required a large grill. Despite the lack of any spices, the meat looked delicious even on screen. After a long day's work, Adam rewarded himself with a piece of crocodile heart, which was juicy and aromatic. The crocodile meat exceeded his expectations so much that he even considered trying to farm it at home, thinking it tastier than beef. Sam believed they were the best team, confident they could complete the challenge together. As night fell, Tara's group was severely troubled by mosquitoes, unable to sleep at all. Although they had heard that fire could repel mosquitoes, the insects here seemed completely fearless. Their bodies were covered in bites, constantly feeling as if mosquitoes were crawling on their backs. If possible, they really wished they had brought a box of insect repellent. Over at Chris's location, the mosquito problem was even worse, with a constant buzzing sound by their ears. Such conditions made it difficult for anyone to sleep, gradually worsening their mental state. Worst of all was Kaila's shelter, which couldn't keep the mosquitoes out, and she had no one to share these troubles. Now, she was both tired and hungry, constantly waving away mosquitoes, wondering how long this would continue. Kaila even thought about giving up the challenge to go home and get a good night's sleep. After a night of struggle, by dawn, they were covered in mosquito bites, with Kaila looking particularly haggard. She pinned her hopes on the soon-to-be-improved shelter, hoping it would provide a good night's sleep. She urgently needed to replenish her food to regain her strength, but the fishing lines set up the day before had caught no fish, further depressing her mood and feeling like the challenge might end in failure.